Right. Working here, which means she's probably anxious to be there. Right, exactly. I'm assuming that's right. Because another person in office texts us and says, "What is that?" So I'm like, "She's not here. She's not here. Exactly. She's leaving that to you. Right. She's working today. Right. Well, I mean, I think that's kind of weird. So she's kind of given what revenue is hard. Right. Gotta be weird. Hey, you want to stand up, don't you? I picked this up, and I was like, "What's going on?" I mean, but it was for. This is for November. I know. I'm like, wait a minute. He's not running again, is he?
Oh.
That's how bad they are. Is you doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready, Council?
Are we ready?
Council.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, I was playing Papa Bear again. No, I banged my phone to call it to order, and it told me to do something else.
Okay, if we could.
Don't bang on me. Siri said, "Don't bang on my head."
Okay, we are now back on record.
Okay, we have just come back from a recess, and Mr. Byrd was on the stand, and Mr. Hunter was in cross, and so we'll turn it back to Mr. Hunter at this time.
Thank you, Lieutenant Byrd. So I believe where we left off was, could you tell what progress had been made in addressing the evidence room issues? You got there in August of 2004, last year, 2013, correct? 14. This year, excuse me, this year, 2014. And the audit had been done in 2011, you think?
I think that's correct.
Could you tell what progress had been made on these issues in intervening 3 years?
When I got to the position, I didn't have a copy of the audit. It wasn't until I met with the district attorney, after I'd already signed on there, written my memo on how to purge the property room, during that meeting with the district attorney, he provided me with the blue line audit. That in that list of number of steps on the recommendations from Mr. Wright on what should take place to help fix the situation, and the audit included hardly anything taking place in that step.
And not to put words in your mouth, but I believe you testified how long had you been there when you were tasked with coming up with a plan to correct that problem?
It was a week or less. I don't remember exactly what days I could sign.
And in carrying and being given that task, had you been provided with any of the basic information, such as the audit of the room, the recommendations of things that were to be corrected, any of that information?
Okay, I'm going to object now because I think that we're getting way off jurisdiction.
I'm just trying. I am trying to elicit whether he believed when he was transferred to this position, he was given the tools to fix the problems he was put in charge with.
I'll concede that he did not believe that he was given the tools. Whether he was or not, it is really really not an issue that we're, but I'll concede that he doesn't think that he was. I mean, this is after his transfer. This is all stuff that happened after he was transferred, which he's already said that there's not a harassment claim before it. He was transferred on that day, so I don't really see any relevance as to what happened afterwards.
I think the relevance comes from the fact that a lot of time has been spent in this motion hearing as to whether or not this was a discrete event or a series of events. And I believe, even though this is your motion, you have directed on that as well. And Mr. Hunter is on cross. I would again remind Mr. Hunter to make sure that we're not litigating the merits and we're staying focused on subject matter jurisdiction. But cross in North Carolina is why this matter has been opened up on direct, and I believe Mr. Hunter is entitled to present his cross with certain latitude. But we do need to be mindful of time, repetition, and staying on point with subject matter. So if we have another objection, we may review that differently.
Okay. Did you, while you were there, while you were in the, once you were transferred to this position, did you find other issues that needed to be addressed immediately within this supply and logistics position you were in?
Yes.
And what was there one that was a major one other than the evidence room?
The radar issue.
Okay, and just very briefly, would you tell the board what that issue was?
We had radars that were being utilized by patrol officers on the road. They were issuing speeding citations, traffic enforcement citations on it, and they had not been calibrated.
And could you tell whether this issue had been dealt with prior to your getting there at all?
No, sir.
And did you attempt to bring this issue to your supervisor's attention?
Yes, sir.
And what sort of response, who was your supervisor?
Acting Captain Rose.
Who had been transferred at the same time you had into the position of an acting captain?
Correct.
And did you get any response from your supervisors when you raised that issue?
I forwarded an email to him right after I found out, I think it was August 21st. I forwarded an email about, we got a significant issue with radars list, we got a significant number that are expired. We need to review this more closely. What guidance can give something to that effect, and then later ask him if he wanted me to send an email out to the whole patrol division, essentially my lieutenant counterparts, to let them know that there was an issue with our radars, and they said yes. And at that time I sent it out to the lieutenants in the patrol division, acting captain Welch and Captain Byrd.
Following that, did your supervisors, were you given any direction how to correct the problem?
No.
Did you eventually go outside the police department as it relates to this issue of the radar equipment?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
Objection, relevant. I understand it's big news, but I'm not sure.
Well, let me withdraw the question I asked. Did you feel that you were being supported in any efforts to correct the problem by your supervisors once you were placed in that position?
No.
Did you feel that it was necessary to go outside the police department in order to have the situation addressed?
Yes.
Do you believe that the situation that you were put into as it relates to the evidence room and to the radar certification issue, do you believe that those situations either have been or have the potential to be harmful to your career?
Yes.
And do you believe that being put in that position, those positions, was part of the harassment and retaliation that you alleged in your grievance?
Yes.
Now, did you in fact receive a direct communication from the chief at some point after you had been transferred over to this new position concerning your July 14th memo, the memo in which you brought up issues about staffing shortages and training?
Yes.
Okay. And is that memo attached to your grievance?
Yes.
Right. And is that attachment 4? It would be attachment 4 to the exhibit C. I'm sorry.
Yes.
And what's it dated?
Dated August 12th, 2014.
Okay, and it's from the Chief Anderson to you, correct?
Correct.
And who else does he copy?
Deputy Chief Wade Wood, Captain Stone Dons, Captain Chris Reese.
Okay. Now, without going into the actual word, reading the memorandum from the chief, essentially, what does the chief say to you in this memo?
Basically, my memo's wrong. It's without basis, factually inaccurate, and misleading.
And does he criticize you for being critical of his decisions?
Yes.
And does he state that your memo should not have been, your questioning of his decisions should not have been circulated within the department?
Correct.
Objection, can you read the exact words, if you're gonna paraphrase what Tom would say?
I believe the witness has answered, but I'm okay with the full answer if Mr. Hunter doesn't object.
No, if you, Lieutenant Byrd, if you'll look at the first non-italicized paragraph on the second page of the memo,
Read from that, sir.
just read that first sentence.
The comments above are your opinion and question the decision of the chief of police, which has no place in an official memorandum to subordinate.
And in the documentation that you reviewed last night, that we received from the city, does the chief give the fact that you questioned his decision as one of the reasons for the transfer?
Yes.
Objection.
Ask and answer. I objected, but the question had already been answered.
No, it's not. And we're going into the reasons that he was transferred. We're getting into it to whether it was justified or not justified. Again, for leeway, but
I have to go on record saying that I agree with counsel for the city that this is going way into the merits and way beyond what's necessary to address the motion or to respond on cross.
Mr. Hunter?
I'll try to, Lieutenant Byrd, has everything you've talked about here today been examples of a series of actions and activities which you have endured at the hands of the chief since you wrote your memo?
Yes.
And you included these matters in your grievance and in the request for the hearing in front of this board, is that correct?
Yes.
You have been a supervisor in the department for how long?
I was promoted to sergeant August 2010.
Okay. And you were in that position for some period of time?
Yes, 2 years.
2 years, and then you became a lieutenant, is that correct? And in your role as do you supervise staff within the department in those roles?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever had an understanding of what is considered to be a position within the department? What that word denotes?
After today, I'm fairly confused on exactly what that means.
Well, I'm asking you in terms of your prior experience, prior to today, prior to hearing Ms. Dickens' testimony, did you have an understanding as to what the word position denoted within the police department?
Yes.
And what would that have been?
Can I object, what he, Ms. Dickens is the interpreter of the policy, what he understood is not relevant.
I believe the witness is entitled to express his opinion. I think that's what Mr. Hunter has asked, not anything about the police.
So, how in the past, how was, to your personal knowledge, how was the word, how did you understand the term position to be used within the department?
It was your placement within the department. It was the job that you actually held within the department.
And is there any question in your mind that when you were transferred or moved from the position of lieutenant in charge of special operations to lieutenant in charge of supply, that you were moved from one position to another?
No.
And did you, in fact, use that term position in your grievances?
Yes.
Now, you were asked a couple of questions about whether you had ever filed a grievance against Captain Gons, correct?
Correct.
And at the time you filed these grievances, had you discovered and gone outside the department as it related to the radar issue?
What's the name, please?
I'm sorry, that wasn't too well. I didn't ask that. You testified that once you got to the department, you discovered the issues surrounding the radar, correct?
Correct.
And Captain Gotts had been the captain in charge of the administrative division where this issue occurred for the preceding year, correct?
Correct.
He was transferred to patrol in August of this year, correct?
Correct.
And if you're go back to patrol to your former position, he would be the captain you'd report to, correct?
Correct.
Now, at the time you drafted these grievances, did you know the full extent of the radar issue, and had you already gone outside the department to report?
Yes.
And did you know that you would be, if you were transferred back, you would be supervised by Gotts at that point? Okay. And is that something, in light of what you've brought forward concerning the radar units and the evidence room issues, that you would have some fear over?
Yes.
Any redirect?
Briefly, Lieutenant Byrd, if you look back at Exhibit C, which is the one that has your email on the front, and it's okay, Mr. Hunter was asking you about the memorandum, which is attached report at the very back. I think you testified that you wrote a memorandum.
You could, I'm sorry, I think the board's trying to keep up with you.
What
Okay.
are you looking at?
Okay, let's, Exhibit C, which is the initial grievance, which has the email on the front. The back of it is Lieutenant Byrd's attachment 4.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. Attachment 2 is your memo to Chuck Sams that was July 14th, where you said that you were unhappy or that talked about the downtown unit. That's July 14th, correct?
Correct.
Then you were reassigned, transferred on about a week later, on July 21st, correct?
That's when the memorandum came out about the union transfer.
Right, but the day that you started in the new spot was August 2nd.
Correct.
So that was the day, it was all done, we talked about that, right? Okay, this memo that's attachment 4 is dated August 12th, 2014. And that's from the chief to you. You say yes?
Yes.
For the state recorder?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And that memo does not, say one word about a transfer or reassignment, does it?
I'd have to review the document. Right offhand, I don't recall anything.
Basically,
other than transfer.
the chief was telling you that he was unhappy with the fact that you wrote the memo, correct?
Correct.
He disagreed with you.
Correct.
Is that right? There was no employment action taken whatsoever in this memo, is there? You're not reassigned, are you?
No.
You're not transferred?
Nope.
You're not demoted? Not terminated? Okay. That's all.
Okay, you just said that. Wait, board has questions, my fault. We'll back. Questions from the board? Go.
Officer Byrd, I wanna, going back to July 21st, which is the date this memo came out where you were informed of the impending reassignments, as I'm using the term on the memo. And it went out to all police personnel, so I assume you got it.
Yes, ma'am.
At that point in time, most of the stuff you've been talking about happened after that point. At that point in time, were you, against this reassignment? Did you have an opinion about it?
Yes.
What, at that time, did you think it was, discriminatory or harassment at that point in time?
I certainly had a lot of questions surrounding the transfer. What the reason was, what the merits were behind the transfer. I had not received any negative criticism from my supervisor. I had not been counseled in job performance. I had gotten good marks on my evaluation. There was no, I wasn't sure why this was taking place,
Was this unusual to you,
as far as,
just reassignments within the department? That you would get a reassignment?
well, it happens, from time to time, as we discussed earlier. But, this particular transfer, I did have questions about, because I thought I was doing a good job in my current position.
How long have you been in that current position?
Started February of 2013, so a little over a year.
A little over a year? And what was your position right before that?
I was a district commander in West Ashland.
I just wanna ask him about this question of being offered the old assignment. Was that offered directly to you or through your attorney, or,
Through Mr. Hunter.
and when did that happen? Was it within the like right before this hearing was about to be scheduled? November what?
Yeah.
That's what John says.
So the way I understand it, the city made the offer to Mr. Hunter, who
Are you-
communicated it to you.
Are you referring to an exhibit that we have?
Yes, it's in both of our exhibits, in the cities, if you want an easy tab, it's E and F. It's the correspondence.
Okay. And did you respond back to the city through Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
And what was your response?
Is that,
That's F.
that's it?
It's what's in F, which I read to be, no. Or is it more ambiguous than that?
What was your question again?
Do you want a reassignment back to your old position?
No.
Absolutely not, will not consider that.
With the current situation of it,
So what are you asking the board to do?
for you to consider this matter and come to a just
What would be your suggestion of a just remedy if you don't want your position in it?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
If Captain Gaunt wasn't in charge of patrol, does that change your considerations as to being offered a previous position?
Potentially.
And in the exhibit F, that was a response that you provided to the city through your attorney, there's a sentence that says, however, I do think the offer could be part of an overall solution to the issues that have plagued the relationship. Did you have some idea as to what you thought would be part of that overall solution? Because it seems to me exhibit F is suggesting an ongoing dialogue. Is that what you were doing?
Yes.
Could you tell us more about that?
Well, I was, speaking with Mr. Hunter, and we were, this could be part of the overall plan. My situation, being subjected to, a continuous series of, harassing actions, you want that to end. You want to be able to come to work and do your job and not have to worry about retribution and retaliation. And that's what I'm saying. And how do we get there? I don't know. We certainly are open to look at that and explore, a bunch of options. What are those options? I'm not sure. And that's what we will look at.
Did you get any kind of affirmative response from the city in regards to exhibit F? Did y'all have any kind of discussions about what that would look like?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the emails here. I thought I had a hard copy.
I might refresh his recollection with some of the.
We don't have those last minute produced documents, so I'm gonna rely on
Do you want me to send you the subsequent emails that came?
I'm just asking his opinion.
In other words, you have subsequent discussions where you talked about what
Correct.
that remedy might look like, and you all just didn't reach an agreement.
Right.
But my concern and my question is the board's authority. The board's authority is to address an unjustified, if it's shown to be, transfer. And the statute says that if we were to find it unjustified, then the transfer would be rescinded. And you are telling us that you refuse to accept rescinding the transfer because that would put you back at your old job. And that's where I'm having trouble.
I'm not hearing that as a board member. I'm hearing that he would reject a certain rescission, but he would be open to others. Am I saying that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. Any further questions from the board for this witness?
Okay.
Go ahead.
This, transfer came about because of the retirement, of Lieutenant's claim, retiring and having to readjust the role. Were there other options that could have put you in the position you're in now, like another lieutenant, other than yours, into that position and leave you where you were?
Yes.
How many lieutenants are there in that police department?
Right off the top of my head, I think we have 9.
None.
I think that's right. Go back to roughly 9.
Roughly. Any further questions from the board?
I have one. I don't know if I should wait until we decide if this is to move forward or not.
Ask the question individually.
When you were transferred or reassigned, did you get a new job description?
I didn't get a job description. I was moved into the position of logistics lieutenant, and I had a new job.
You have a written job description someplace, right? You've always had some sort of
Someplace.
written description of your job. And my question is, did you get a new one?
I was not given a document, a written documentation stating, these are your roles, responsibilities, duties, activities. No, I was not given that.
How did you know what your duties were?
I'm still trying to figure that out.
You weren't given any information to show that you were supposed to do something different.
I have one question about field training officers. Is it customary in the Asheville Police Department that a new training officer is assigned to a field training officer?
Yes, sir.
How long is that officer assigned to an FTO?
It varies depending on if that new training has an experience, if they are certified and they've been on board with us, they can have an abbreviated training period where they may have, let's say, for example, 8 weeks of training. Where you may have another individual that has had no law enforcement experience, may not have a lot of life experience, and their training span may be extended. It could be 4, 5, 6 months, just depending on, what their learning pace is and how they, progress through the training program.
Then did I understand your testimony correctly, that at some point, due to the manpower shortages, that there was consideration given to not assigning new trainees to a FTO?
Correct. The directive that I was given was, is that we would assign the folks in field training, we would assign them to veteran officers, not necessarily field training officers.
That's all my question.
I have one more. If we were to rule in your favor, we would have to rescind the decision that you're complaining of. You're saying, what I heard was that you would only accept your old position if there were some other conditions attached to it, that the board has discretion, or you believe the board has discretion to add to it. But what if we chose not to exercise our discretion and just rescinded the unjustified employment decision? You've stated clearly that you would not take the job, your old position in those circumstances. Am I correct? What would be your response to a decision from the board that said, we rescind the decision, that's it?
I have full faith and confidence that you, the board, are going to make the proper and just decision. So what that decision is, I have full confidence in.
But my question was, will you take your job back under those circumstances?
I will go along with the board's recommendation.
But you're here in front of the board today because you have concerns about retaliation, and you're asking the board to craft some decision that protects you from ongoing retaliation. Is that correct understanding of your testimony?
Yes.
And this is probably not the time to do this in our little closings here, but I think it's not unusual for an employer or the city or for any employer, it's clear they believe there has been harassment or retaliation, to deal with that in a sort of somewhat more global fashion, where people may be, where arrangements are made to protect the person from that happening again. So, I was going to point out that that's not.
I would agree there. Are there any further questions from board members for this witness? Hearing none, if there's nothing further for this witness from council, we'll allow you to sit down, Lieutenant Byrd. Thank you for your testimony. And at this point, I think it would be appropriate in the motion process to allow council time to do a summation. Would that be correct?
Well, I don't know that the city's put on all their, I won't say evidence, all their documents in support of their motion. And then Mr. Hunter gets to offer any documents he wants to respond to the city's motion.
we've submitted all of the documents to you that we intend on submitting.
And I think it's correct to say that we, in this process, the documents we had attached were also submitted. Let me just check.
We stipulated to,
Right, and I think they're all in evidence. Yeah, so our only documents that we would use in response are the ones that were attached to our response, which have already been here.
Okay. Do you have any further evidence other than as admitted, Ms. Curran?
yes, sir,
Okay, and does that rest your case regarding the motion?
that's my motion.
Okay, I believe Mr. Hunter may be entitled to present what evidence he wishes in opposition to the motion. Do you have that, or where are you at with that?
I think we would be prepared, may I speak to my client just for 1 second? I don't even take a recess. I can speak to my
The board will stand in recess, so we won't have anything on the record in your
Okay.
absence.
All right, then we stand in recess while I am attorney-client conference. Mr. Attorney, you ready for us to return to the record?
We are.
Okay, then I'll ask you to hold till we get back on the record. Okay, Mr. Attorney, we are now back on the record, and you had asked for a few moments to speak with your client about whether you want to present evidence in opposition to the motion.
And we, other than, we have no additional evidence to present other than what has been already testified to, on the issue of the motion to dismiss.
Okay, so at this time, the chair concludes that all evidence related to the motion and opposition to the motion has been presented. And I believe it'd be appropriate to hear a final, summation from either party. Council, do we have a time frame for that?
That's up to the board.
Up to the board, I knew you were gonna say that.
I mean, I will say that the suggestion in your hearing outline is no more than 10 minutes for closing on the merits. So,
So maybe 5 minutes on a motion.
that might be a good time.
Council, how do you feel about, max of time of 5 minutes for, summation on your motion position?
That would be great.
Mr. Hunter?
That's fine.
Okay, customarily, I guess, since it's the city's motion, they would get to go last, is that correct?
First and last.
First and last. Where are you at, Mr. Kearns? Would you like to go first and last?
I can
or
wait,
last?
they can wait for first.
Let him go first, we'll go last.
Mr. Hunter, the board is with you for closing argument on the motion.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a few points to make as it relates to this. The whole issue here is whether or not Lieutenant Byrd filed a timely grievance with the city concerning his transfer. And I don't think there can be any doubt that he did that in the form of a grievance that included, that said he was the subject of an ongoing condition of harassment that included a series of actions by the chief against him. And the involuntary transfer was one of those. The city received that grievance. They did not deny that grievance as being untimely in any way. And therefore, he has filed a timely grievance with the city on that issue. It was not dealt with by the city, but that was their choice. And he then followed up with that, having exhausted those administrative remedies, having exhausted those steps that were available to him on that grievance, he then followed that up by filing a request for a hearing with this board in a timely fashion. If you read the Civil Service Act, that's all that's required, is that there be a timely grievance filed within the city, which he did, and that after that is disposed of in one way or the other, he files here with this board within 10 days, which he did. And the issue he brought to this board is one of the issues that was inside the grievance. So the grievance was timely because it was an ongoing condition, and he then followed that up with a grievance before this board. The fact that one of the issues, one of the actions that we allege that were taken as part of the harassment, the fact that it was a action that is grievable to this board, somehow the city wants to say you can't bootstrap them. We're not bootstrapping them at all. We're saying it was part of the grievance that time the grievance that was filed, and now that part, the part of that grievance that can be appealed to this board, has been appealed to this board, and that's straightforward. So that's the timeliness issue. On whether or not this was a transfer or not, the city can't point to anything that defines this word that they're using, reassignment. It's not in their policy. It's not on any of their documentation. The documentation they use, it says this is a transfer. Someone's tried to write that out and put in the word reassignment, but it certainly wasn't there originally. And the definition of lateral transfer that Ms. Dickinson testified to exactly fits the situation with Lieutenant Byrd. It says a lateral transfer occurs when an employee accepts an offer of employment into a different position, but in the same pay grade as their current position. This lateral transfer may occur inside or outside the employee's current division or department. When I asked Ms. Dickens, what about Lieutenant Byrd's situation isn't covered by this, she said he wasn't moved from one position to another. He stayed in the same position. He's a lieutenant here, he's a lieutenant there. They don't have a definition of the word position, but if you look at the Personnel Policy Handbook, which the city submitted as an item of evidence in this case, everywhere the word position shows up, it's used to mean a specific job someplace. As common sense would tell you. If you look at, and I just marked 3 or 4 of them in the first couple of pages. If you look at page, at section 23, which is on page 10 of 25 of their own policy, it says, section 23 is promotions. It is the policy of the city to encourage filling vacancies and positions above the entry level in any job classification by promotion of city employees. Clearly, when they're using the word position there, they're talking about a specific job that you apply for and that you get. On the next page, they're talking about what a probationary employee can, what rights a probationary employee has. And it says, this section shall apply to non-probationary employees who are transferred to new positions within the city. It's clearly referring to situations where a person is moved from one set of job duties to another set of job duties. That's what a position is. The final one I was going to point out to the board says reinstatement. An employee of the city who is on educational, family, medical, military, or other unauthorized leave shall be reinstated to his or her former position or one of comparable seniority, status, and salary. So right there it tells you that a position within their own policy is a specific position, a specific job, and that I don't think that they can now come back and say, oh, this really wasn't a transfer because it was made up of, he wasn't moved from a rank of a lieutenant to a rank of something else. Finally, on the question of mootness, just really quickly, I'll say I think the board has heard what our position is on why this shouldn't be a moot issue at this point. The board's authority is greater than just moving him back into the position to address this problem.
Ms. Kern, will we do the same?
Thank you. With respect to reassignment versus transfer, I think we sort of beat that to death. I think we do know that, maybe it's used one way sometime and maybe another, even Mr. Byrd misused it, but I think you need to bear down to what Ms. Dickens says the purpose is. And and that is that if you have the same job title, the same pay, and the same benefits, that you have to have the ability to take your employees and tell them, today go pick up the mail. Tomorrow, go to the courthouse. The next day, do something different. And that doesn't rise to the level of a grievable offense. Instead, that is a transfer under Section 38 of the Personnel Policy, which talks about coming to a civil service board. It is something when you are transferred to a position involuntarily to another department. It really is sort of common sense as to what rises to that level. With respect to timeliness, Mr. Hunter continues to mix together the two claims. The evidence is undisputed that there's harassment. You can grieve an harassment claim to the city. It stops at the city manager. You can grieve an involuntary transfer to the city, and it stops at this board. The thing is that you can't piggyback and take the harassment allegations and use them for the statute of limitations on the involuntary transfer. The memo that he claims extends the statute of limitations, Mr. Byrd admitted it did not mention an employment decision, did not mention reassignment, didn't have anything to do with that. He was done. It had to do with their dispute over what happened downtown. So that is not going to extend to statute of limitations. You've got to be able to say, look, and there are dozens of federal cases that deal with this, and it's like a harassment. You get an extended time. An event, you don't. Transfer, you absolutely don't. And frankly, here, he has a harassment claim, and everything that he's talking about that he even wants from you, he's like, stop the harassment. That's the remedy he wants. Well, he's not in front of you on a harassment claim. With respect to mootness, I do want to just briefly say, what the remedy is and isn't really, I guess, to me, doesn't really impact that. He has been offered to have his old job back. Now, what he says to you is that's not good enough because I got this new supervisor, and I don't think that I can work under him. His grievance is about Chief Anderson's harassment, not Stoney Gontz's harassment. Chief Anderson is gone as of December 31st. His harasser will no longer be at the APD. So now he says, well, I might have another harasser. Well, he said he's not grieved him. He hasn't alleged harassment against him. He says he just thinks it might happen because he found his radar guns. There is nothing in front of this board that says that Stoney Gontz is the type of person that if you don't step in here and do something different, is going to harass him if he gets what he asked for when he started. So for that reason, we think that it's a reassignment. We think even if it's a transfer, it's untimely. You can't let people extend over and over. He says, okay, you didn't make a decision in 30 days. So just because someone doesn't make a decision in 30 days, which is essentially allowing you to exhaust and not get stuck in the city, bureaucracy, that, oh, they didn't sign mine in 30 days, therefore I can have a 10-year statute of limitations when everybody else has 15 days. That's not fair. Step one is step one. He didn't make it. And I'm sorry about that, but that's just what the undisputed facts say. And then finally, we do think we've tried to work with him. We've tried to tell him, tell us what you want. We want to work with you. And basically, as we said, I don't want to be in the chain of command. None of your captains are acceptable. And we do not think that this board should take a step and try to figure that out. He's offered his job. We think it's me.
Thank you. With that, I think we have taken all the evidence and heard all the arguments related to the city's motion to dismiss. Therefore, I think it's time to consider a motion to go into closed session. Before we do that, I wanted to say a little bit about the procedure. If I'm not, we don't know how long it will take us in closed session to make a decision. But we have reserved this Friday, to continue this matter. Don't know that we will work very late into the evening, because we have board members with other obligations. So depending what our decision is, we may end up reconvening on Friday or not, but that's what the board anticipates at this point. So if our council could tell us about a closed session motion. Sure.
The motion would be to go into closed session pursuant to NC Gens section 143-318.11A3. Consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body. And also subsection 6, to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee, or to hear or investigate a complaint, charge, or grievance by or against an individual public officer or employee.
Chair will entertain the motion at this time.
I so move.
We have a movement and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of going into closed session pursuant to the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? There being no opposed, the motion carries unanimously. We are in closed session.